In today's video, I will go over the case prep. I bought 5,000 rounds of washed and polished 223 brass from Capital Cartridge in November of 2023 for $435 delivered, which equals 0.087 cents each. It was advertised as a mixed head stamp, unprocessed, all brass, and may contain 556 cases. 5,000 rounds, which is about 2 5-gallon buckets. Out of those, 65 were head stamps with IK, and I had a 1/16 flash hole in them, which is smaller than standard. Should be short for I knew it, because as soon as I pulled the handle down, I knew it, and it was very hard to stop. I was able to anneal a few decapping rods, which I bent straight, and they worked until I hit the next AK head stamp. I did notice later that the primers were extremely flat, and that's consistent with the overpressurized load. 4 various head stamp cases were oversized primer pocket, 2 were extremely undersized, and 1 had a live primer with a projectile down inside the case, no powder. That was out of 5,000 rounds total. I could have remedied these, but for my purposes, a total of 72 cases were unusable. And in the process of finding these, I went through 4 decapping rods on the Lyman Universal decapping die. I used the Frankfurt Arsenal Impress because the shell plate's automatic shell holder made it quick to insert and eject cases for decapping. After decapping or depriming all the cases, I ran them through the Frankfurt Arsenal swedging tool. I have a Dillon swedge tool and a Hornady swedging die, but for this batch of cases, I use the Frankfurt Arsenal because it is vertical and it works well. I don't use a flash hole DEBUR on all the cases, but when I swedge the cases, if one is off kilter or raised higher, it tells me that there's an obstruction near the flash hole on the inside, and I ran the flash hole deburring uniform tool, also from Lyman. I don't ream the primer pockets with a primer pocket uniformer because I don't like the idea of removing material, and it's too loose for my liking after that process is done. However, in my experience, after swedging alone, the primer cup tends to get caught up on the ridge that is left, and that's why I put a slight chamfer on the primer pocket after swedging, which you'll see shortly after resizing and trimming when I chamfer and debur the case mouth. Resizing rifle brass requires lubrication. This process is fairly smooth since the added resistance of removing the primer has been previously done. It entails squeezing the case into a form, the resizing die, and then drawing back down over a neck size expander ball. This process uniforms the brass to the size of the inner wall of the body, and in doing so squeezes the case, making it longer with the excess material. For 223, SAMI specifications are from 1.760 to 1.742 overall length. When I reload these on my Dillon RL550, it's important that the case lengths are uniform for the bullet crimp portion of the process. It's a taper crimp, so a longer case would have more crimp and a short case would have less crimp. With that said, a shorter case will inevitably result in a longer free bore before the projectile hits the lands. It keeps it parallel to the bore until it contacts the lands, having less of a free bore, and potentially increases the accuracy. Too long of a case will clamp the case mouth onto the projectile, causing pressure spikes and inducing high velocity variations. I play it safe and trim the cases to 1.750 overall length. Some may be short and won't get trimmed, but I can accept that knowing after subsequent firings they will grow, and if I continue to trim to 1.750 overall length, they will all become equal more or less in the future. Trimming the case mouth can leave a burr and also sharp 90-degree angles. Even though I will be loading these with boat tail full metal jackets, I want the bullet release to be smooth, and also I don't want any ridges for the case to hang up during feeding into the chamber. I am chamfer and deburring the case mouth and also putting a slight chamfer on the primer pocket like I talked about. In the past, I've had primers hang up on the rim left after swaging and military crimp, and even crescent shavings show up on the shell plate, and flattened primers from excess force required to push them into the primer pocket. The chamfer and DEBUR process will leave a microscopic ridge on the edge of the cut, and this last step in brass preparation will be to wet tumble with stainless pin media. This will smooth out those edges, removing case lubrication, cleaning the exposed primer pockets. And in the next video, I hope to show the continuation of the case preparation during wet tumble and begin to load the ammunition. This sequence works best for me overall for several reasons. Even though it's another step, I prefer to decap separately from resizing. The decapping rods are cheaper to replace in a universal decapping die as opposed to a sizing die. I have a Redding, Lee, and a Lyman universal decapping die, and I prefer the Lyman overall. Ideally, these cases will be uniform when all is done, and in the future, I won't have to do these steps. I will be able to clean them, run them through the progressive prep for multiple reloadings. It is important for me to try and collect my brass without introducing new brass that may have military crimps, the primer pockets, or other problems. After several firings, I will trim them as well as chamfer and DEBUR the case mouth. Normally though, I will only wet tumble and run them through the progressive prep. As I'm finishing up here, I'm just reaming the primer pocket, and you can see it's about the last of this video.